Hi, this is Kathy from Night Owl Quilting Studio, and I have been teaching quilting for about 21 years now. And in all of those years, I can't tell you how many times I've been teaching a beginner class and demonstrating rotary cutting and some of the good skills and the good techniques for rotary cutting. And my students have asked me over and over and over, do I have a recording of myself teaching this so that they can go home and watch it? Well, I finally have the technology available to me to do this. So I thought I would share a demonstration for you on how to do really good rotary cutting. And as I tell all my students, there are three really good rules that I like to encourage people to use when they're doing their rotary cutting. The very first one is to cut your pieces accurately, because if you don't cut your pieces accurately, it doesn't matter how good you sew them together. It doesn't matter how accurate you try to get any other part of your quilt. If you don't start out with the right size piece to start with, it's not going to fit properly. So the very first rule of good quilting is to do good rotary cutting. And you also want to do it very safely. So what I'd like to share with you are all of my tips and techniques. So the first thing is, let's say you go to the store, like our Night Owl Quilting Studio, and you pick up a nice fat quarter. You can see I have this beautiful red solid fat quarter. And if you just, purchased this and brought it into class and you open it up and you can see that there's a lot of ripples and folds in here where the fabric has been maybe sitting on the shelf for a while. You notice that there's a big seam running down the middle of it here. Or if you've purchased fabric on the bolt and maybe you have a yard of fabric, you know that there's a really big crease in the fold area. So if you tried to just take this and set it down on your mat and do your cutting, you would not get an accurate cut because all of those folds in the fabric take up space. So the very first thing that you want to do when you get your fabric and open it up is you really want to press it well. And what I recommend is that you use a product called Best Press. And this is something that we sell in the store. You can get it in a small portable bottle. You can get it in the 16-ounce size, or you can buy it like I do by the gallon, because I use this all the time. So it's really important that you have your fabric nice and flat and pressed well, like this piece here, so that when you go to cut, it's going to be cut accurately. The next thing that you want to watch for is the grain line that you cut your fabric on. So you should be able to see pretty clearly this white salvage edge. And on the other end of the fabric, there's another piece of white salvage. So the grain line that runs from the salvage edge on the right side to the salvage edge on the left side, that's called the crosswise grain. The crosswise grain of fabric is relatively stretchy. You can see that it stretches out pretty good. The grain line that runs along the edge of the salvage of the fabric is called the lengthwise grain. And as you can see, when I pull on that, it barely pulls at all. That's a very strong grain line. Most of your quilting pieces are going to be cut on the crosswise grain, so that you have a little bit of give in the pieces as you're putting them together. It helps them to fit together better in most cases. If you were to take your fabric and you were to fold it from corner to corner like this across, that gives you a bias grain. And you can see that that's extremely stretchy. So you wouldn't want to cut it that way unless you were cutting a triangle shape. And in that case, you would definitely have a part of a bias within your block. But most of the fabric that you're going to cut for any quilt that you're making is going to be cut on your crosswise grain. So some of the tools that you need for cutting your fabric, you're going to need a good cutting mat, and it should be something they call a self-healing cutting mat. The other thing that you're going to use is a rotary cutter. And I especially like the newer ones that have come out that are from Olfa, and it has a little handle like this, so that when you push on the handle, that will engage the blade. It allows the blade to come out. You can see the silver blade underneath the yellow piece there. But when you let go of it to put it down, the blade goes back in and is protected, and you don't see it showing outside the yellow protective area anymore. That's really important for safety. So this is the one that I like the best because I don't have to always remember to click a button or push a guard up or anything like that when I set it down. We do have both types here. We have this rotary cutter, and we have another one that's called the splash rotary cutter, which is a straight one. And that one you do have to push a guard up and down. So this is another tool that you need for good rotary cutting. You're also going to need a really good acrylic ruler. If you can only buy one ruler, I recommend that you get a 6.5 by 24-inch long ruler. You can use this ruler for just about every type of square or triangle or diamond shape or anything that you're going to be using to cut for your quilts. It does have your diagonal lines in here, your 30, your 45, and your 60-degree lines. So it's a very useful tool. And as I said, if this is the only one you can buy, I would highly recommend this size to start with. So what you're going to do with your fabric is you're going to fold it in half with the selvage edges lined up together as close as you can. But the selvage edge is not always very even. As you can see, it's kind of uneven here on the end. So you just line it up as close as you can so that the rest of it lays nice and smooth and flat, and there's no little twist or turns in the fold. You should always have the folded edge closest to your body near the end of the mat. I use the lines on the mat. You can see that my mat has grid lines. I use the lines on the mat for positioning and lining up the fabric. I do not use them for measuring. The most accurate measuring comes from your ruler, your acrylic ruler. So to start with, fabric is generally uneven at the edge. You can see even when I have it folded that this edge is not exactly even. The fabric lays nice and flat, but this edge is a little bit kind of off whack, if you want to call it that. And that happens from the way the manufacturers roll it onto the bolts. Or sometimes it's because of the way it's cut when you have it cut at the store. And so what you're going to do is you're going to place the fold of the fabric on the first line up from the edge. So it's about 1 inch up from the bottom of your mat. Then you want to take if you are right-handed, you are going to take this uneven edge and you are going to place that. I'm going to position the camera just a little bit different so you can see up here, because the underneath side is the side that's a little bit shorter. If you can see, the top side is a little bit longer than the one on the bottom. So I'm going to choose a line on the mat. In this particular case, I'm on the 27, and I'm on the 27 down at the bottom as well. I want to make sure that a little tiny bit of this bottom edge of the bottom of the fabric is over that line, because I want to start out with a nice straight line on my fabric. And I want to make a nice straight cut so that every other strip or piece that I cut along the way of the fabric is going to be starting out with a nice straight cut. it's important to position your ruler and your hand properly. So what I recommend is that you don't just come and set your ruler down at the edge, because sometimes you might be able to see on here, but a little puff of air will make the fabric move a little bit. So it's best to put the ruler sort of in the fabric, somewhat a little bit over, kind of not necessarily the middle, but just over a little bit, and then slide it this way. So if you are a right-handed person, you are going to be cutting on the right-hand side of your ruler. If you are a left-handed person, you'll be cutting on the left-handed side of your ruler. Your rotary blade, if you're right-handed, should be on the left-hand side of the rotary cutter. So if you notice, when I'm holding it straight looking at you, the right side of the cutter is here, but the blade is on the left side. And that is so that the blade on the left will be right up against the ruler on the right side. These are interchangeable. If you are left-handed and you have this ruler, you can remove the blade and you can move it over to the other side, because when you're cutting on your fabric, you're going to be cutting on the left side of the ruler, and you're going to want the blade on the right side of the cutter. So that's the difference for the right and the left-handed individuals. The next thing that you want to do is you're going to line up the right-hand edge of your ruler along that line on the mat. As I said, I use the lines on the mat for lining up and positioning, but not for measuring. So remember, I said that I had the edge of the fabric slightly over the number 27 line. So my edge of my ruler is going to be right on that 27 line. Now the positioning for your hand is important as well. If you were to just put your hand on top of the ruler like this, some people just lay it down like this. Some people know that they need to fan it out a little bit and they just put it on the top. But as you're going down the ruler, you might be you should be putting pressure on the rotary blade. So that could be shifting the ruler this way slightly. And so your cut is going to end up being crooked and not straight. So there's a couple of ways that you can avoid that from happening. First of all, the hand positioning. If you place the pinky of your hand, in this case, I'm right-handed, so my left hand is going to be on the ruler. So if you put your pinky on the mat, but right up against the edge of the ruler, and you fan your fingers out, so it gives more pressure across the whole width of the ruler. You want to keep your hand about 1.5 inches to 2 inches away from the edge. So keeping the pinky over here on the side helps you to do that. If you had your whole hand on here, you might get too close to this edge, and that could be dangerous. You could very, very easily accidentally cut your finger. So if you keep your pinky over here, and then as you're going down with your rotary blade, if you're pushing hard on that, the pinky is offsetting that and helping to keep the ruler straight. If you start out at the bottom of the cut with your hand down here, and as you move up on the cut, your hand is still down here, there's still the chance that up at the top, you could be shifting that ruler. So what you want to do is never remove the blade, because then you'll lose your spot where you are cutting. So if you're on your way up, you're about midway up on your ruler and your hand is still at the bottom, just walk your fingers up like this on the ruler, reposition your pinky on the outside, and then continue on with the rest of the cut. Now I want to show you the body language that you need to use when you're doing this as well. So you want to make sure that you're standing straight on to your ruler, and you want to be careful of your elbow movement. because the way that your elbow moves is, if you watch my hand, the hand moves when my elbow moves out. So if I'm going along down here and I get out here to stretch and my elbow is stretching out here, my blade is turning towards the ruler. The blade needs to stay straight. And you also, when you do it this way, you also lose strength and cutting power. So the proper body position for cutting would be to keep your elbow and your arm as close to your body as you possibly can. And then you're going to come straight out with it, just like this. And then as you get further up, you're going to lean your body in so that you still have the strength to be cutting all the way to the end and get a good firm cut. So that's the very important body language that you want to use. So another thing that you can do is, if you find that you're positioning your hand properly, but for some reason you're still having slippage with your ruler, which can definitely happen, there is a really wonderful product out on the market that you can use. And let me show you this a little bit closer so you can see how this works. The product is called Invisigrip, and it comes in a rolled package like this. When you open the package up, it comes like this, and it has a paper backing, and it has a shiny side. You can see that this side is shiny, and this side is sort of a matte finish. It's the shiny side that is the grip that's on here. I have the Invisigrip on the back of all of my rulers, and I'll show you this smaller ruler that I have, and I'll peel this off and you can see what it looks like. It's just a very clear film like this. It's not sticky or anything, so it has no glue on it. It just adheres to your ruler with static cling. So you just smooth it down and it fits snugly on your ruler. I've had some of my rulers covered with this for many years. It lasts a very, very long time. It's clear and see-through, so you can see my hand through it. There's nothing blocking any of the lines on my ruler, so I can still see all of my markings. And so it's a great product. And the way that you would put this on, and trust me, this roll will do a lot of your rulers. So you would take your ruler and you would roll it out with the shiny side up like this. And you're going to position your ruler so that you have a 1/2 inch at the bottom of the ruler. So the bottom of the ruler is going to be at the 1/2 inch mark to the bottom of the Invisigrip. The side is also going to be at the 1/2 inch mark. So you're cutting the Invisigrip a 1/2 inch shorter on both the length and the width of your ruler, and you're doing that on purpose. Because when you position the Invisigrip on the back, you're going to do it on the back of the ruler. When you position it on the back, you want it to be 1/4 of an inch in on all sides. That ensures that you don't have any of the plastic film over the edge, and it won't be cut with your rotary cutter or anything. It's going to be all contained within the size and space of your ruler. So it's very simple to apply. If you're worried about, is this going to hurt your rotary cutter if you cut it? Because just like your sewing scissors, you should not be using your rotary cutter to cut paper with. But I've been doing this long enough that I have a rotary cutter for paper and I have a rotary cutter for fabric. But you don't need to necessarily do that. To just make this, you're going to make a cut up and across the top of your ruler. That little bit will not damage your blade enough to worry about. So if you only have one rotary cutter, that's perfectly fine. All right, so that's how you would apply the Invisigrip. And like I said, this one roll, you can see I've cut little sections out of it and stuff, and it's covered quite a bit of ruler for me. And I have it on my square rulers, I have it on my long rulers. It's just really an awesome product. And it definitely helps to keep the ruler lined up and in place. Okay, so let's go back to the process of cutting our fabric. So I am going to make my first straight cut, and I'm going to reposition this so that I have it correctly on my ruler. I'm going to position my hand. Now this rotary cutter has a little locking blade, so when I'm not using it, I always tend to lock that. So I'm going to unlock it so that I can bring the blade out. The other important thing is that you want to have your fabric up about 1 inch from the edge of your mat, and you want the edge of your ruler to be down at the end of your mat, so you have 1 inch of ruler here before you get to your fabric. So you want to start your blade against your ruler and behind the fabric so that you're starting behind the fold. The blade of the rotary cutter is round, and I have seen many a student that will try to start right at the fold, and the back of the fold is behind the round blade, and so it doesn't get cut properly. So you want to start off of the fabric. The other thing is it gives you a chance to start pushing as you go before you're actually on the fabric. So you put it on the mat, you start pushing down, give it some pressure, and then you start sliding it up. It's important that your blade be right up against the acrylic ruler. Lock your hand up if you need to. Continue on. But as you can see, I am not moving my blade. I'm only moving my hand up the ruler. So then once I've done that, I can peel away this little tiny sliver of fabric that I've cut, and that gets rid of that uneven edge. So now I have a nice straight edge. I always leave this main part of my fabric lay. I take the ruler away and pick up the piece that I've just cut, because this is still all squared up and positioned properly. So now let's say I want to make a 2.5 inch cut. So now I'm going to look for the 2.5 inch line on my ruler, and I'm going to bring that over to so that the 2.5 inch line is lined up. You may not be able to see it on the video, but it's lined up with the nice straight edge of the fabric that I just cut. So my 2.5 inch line is right here on the edge of my fabric. Again, position your hands properly, get your blade ready, push down, and then start to cut. I always cut in this direction, from the left to the right. And the reason I do that is because if I needed this 2.5 inch strip of fabric in my quilt and something happened to it, and that was my last 2.5 inch strip of what I had available for fabric, and I cut it a different way, I could ruin it. But this strip that I need for my quilt is under the ruler. So now I'm going to move the ruler away, and I'm going to pick up the strip. And you can see that I have a nice 2.5 inch strip cut very well on both sides, nice straight lines on both sides, 2 layers of fabric because I cut through the folded fabric. So now I have 2 pieces here. If I had started cutting over here, because I see this happen a lot, I see people using the lines on their mat and they go over 2.5 inches and they cut here. The fabric is here on this side. And let's say they weren't positioning their body right and they were going like this. And as they start to stretch out, the ruler veers off to the right here. Well, they just veered off into the 2.5 inch strip that they needed for their quilt. And so now they've ruined it. They don't have a full 2.5 inch strip. So now they'll have to, move that over to the side, use it for some other project, re-straighten out this piece, and then try to cut another one. If you do it the way I showed you, doing it from left to right instead of cutting from right to left, the ruler is on top of the fabric. It's protecting the strip that you need, and you will always get a nice straight cut like this. So let's say I was going along and something happened. I didn't have my body language right or something, and I did veer off a little bit. I'm veering off into this extra fabric. I'm not ruining my strip yet, so I could just take that away, leave my ruler on top of this strip, and come back and make a nice straight cut for the rest of it, and I would still have a pristine 2.5-inch strip or whatever size I needed. So that's a really important tip on how to get some accurate rotary cutting. If you are left-handed, you're going to do exactly the same thing, but you're going to do it from the other end. So you are going to place your ruler on top of your fabric 2.5 inches over from the edge of the ruler, and then you are going to cut on this side, on the left-hand side of the ruler with your rotary cutter. Now, a couple other things that you need to know is rotary cutter blades can get dull. They do last a very, very long time, but they can get dull. And what can also happen is, if maybe you don't even realize it, but maybe you've hit a pin, or maybe there was something laying under your fabric and you didn't realize it, or maybe your mat has gotten really old and rough and everything, and so you've got a little nick in the blade and you can't see it really. But let's say you're going along and cutting, and you notice that when you go to take the piece away that you've cut, every so often, like maybe every 4 or 5 inches, you have a little string of thread that did not cut away properly. If it seems to be consistently in the same spot every couple inches or so, that generally means that you have a nick in your blade. So you definitely want to change your blade. If you just find that you having to press harder and harder and it's just not giving you a good cut all the time, it just means your blade is worn out and you need to change it. So I'm going to show you now how to change your blade properly. And so it works the same way with no matter which type of blade that you have. The blades, the replacement blades, come in a package something like this. Sometimes they come as a single one like this. It means there's one blade in the package. Sometimes they come in a 5-pack, which means you have 5 blades in the package. So they come in this nice little plastic case. And in this case, we have multiple blades in here. So there's a little, you can probably see there's a little stack of them in there. So when there's a little stack, you have to be kind of careful when you take them out. So I just kind of slide them all out into my hand, and then I very gently separate them like this. You can kind of see them separating so that I can pick up on the top blade and find the top blade. The blades are extremely sharp, so you have to be very, very careful when you're changing your blade. And there is a tiny bit of oil that's in between each of the blades that helps to separate it, especially when they're in the multi-packs. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to, if you have a lock on your blade, or you have the protector where you can push the button up and it protects the blade, you want to make sure that that's engaged. So you want to make sure that your blade is locked so it's not going to accidentally move on you. Then you're going to turn it, you're going to hold your finger on this part here and you're going to turn it over. You're going to unscrew this little screw here. And underneath this screw, you should find 2 washers. The first, and then you can kind of tip it over to take the washers out. The first one is going to be a little metal washer like this. And if you can see in the video, it's kind of bowed up a little bit. Let me see if I can get this positioned properly so you can see how it bows up. Maybe putting it flat in my hand would be the best way. You can see how it kind of bows up a little bit. When you're putting this back on, it's very important that it does bow upwards, that it's not facing down. I can get it to work, cooperate with me here. You want to make sure that it's not facing down like this so that it's kind of lumping up in the middle. You want to make sure that the edges are bowing upwards. Otherwise, it's not going to tighten down properly and your blade will wobble on you when you are, when you're trying to cut. I've seen that happen a few times and people just don't realize that that is really important, the positioning on that, because nobody has ever showed them. And then there's another little plastic washer that goes in there. Then this little screw is connected to the other side, to this cap right here. So once you have the screw and the nuts off, you just simply lift up the cutter and there's your blade in your hand. So then you would just very carefully lift the blade right up off of the stem there. And this is the perfect opportunity to clean the blade off and all of the pieces of the equipment, because just like you have to clean your sewing machines on a regular basis, the thread and the batting and all the things that you cut with your rotary blade can put a lot of lint in there. I haven't done mine recently. You can see that there's a lot of lint and dirt in there. It's not a bad idea to every once in a while, even if your blade's not giving you a problem, to kind of clean that off and get rid of some of that lint and dust. At this time, if you were left-handed, you could switch it over to this side. As you can see, when there is no blade there, they look exactly the same on either side. And this little post will go in either direction. It will go in on that side. It'll go in on this side. So it's interchangeable. So then you would take your new blade, and I'm actually going to put my old blade back in because it's still working. You would lay it on here first on if you're right-handed, you would put it on the left-hand side of the blade. So you'd be holding it up like this, put this little cap back on, and then hold that again and turn it over. This is when you would put on the plastic washer. Now, I have noticed that some of them do not have the plastic one, they just have the metal one. But if you have the plastic one, you would put that on next. And then you'll also notice that this is sort of rectangular shaped. It's not square. So there's two sides of this little post, this little screw post, that is rectangular shaped. So you want to make sure that you get it on there so that it fits in like that. And you can see that it's bowing upwards. The other thing is that the screw itself has a flat side to it, and it has a side that the screw pieces are sort of indented in. The indented inside is the side that goes down towards the screw. The flat side should be what's on the top. And then you would just tighten it down, and a really good hand tightening is all you really need. You don't need to get any screwdriver, any kind of tools out or anything. Just a good hand tightening is all that you need. Now, the other thing that you can do with this case, I'm going to very carefully slide these back in there. If I had, you see that I've marked with a marker. I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of wiping off, but I wrote the word new so that I know in this case, these are all new blades. If I have a package that has just a single blade in it and I'm taking this out to replace my blade, I keep this plastic case and I write with a black marker on it, used. You never want to throw a rotary blade in the trash can by itself. So I actually keep this case, and you can, even though it sells with only one in it, it will fit 5 or 6 or 7 used blades. So I just hold on to this, and every time I change a blade, I put it in the one marked used, and I hold on to this until it's full, and then I can discard it safely. So I know that I've covered a lot tonight, but there is a lot to good rotary cutting. And I hope that some of the tips and the techniques and the demonstration that I have given you will help you to find that you will get a more accurate cut piece for your quilts. You'll find that your quilts will come together smoother and you'll have better results. Thank you very much for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed the demonstration.